everyone, Kimberly Solfridge here with the Kids Money Project, and welcome to Mommies and Money. I'm here with Paula Weiss of CNS Insurance. Hey, Paula, how are you doing this afternoon?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you so much. It's hump day. Happy Wednesday.
Yes, absolutely. But oh, go ahead. You look like you were about to say something.
No, I was going to say it's just we're waiting for the storms to come, so we're enjoying the weather right now. So it's okay.
Right.
So if you're anywhere around Plano, Texas, we're going to get a whole bunch of rain soon.
Well, it's kind of weird. I'm actually down a little further in South Texas.
That's right.
So I'm not actually going to experience that today, but kind of
Mhm.
different surroundings for me, as you can probably see behind me, not my normal background.
Yes.
But
Yes.
but we are here kind of continuing we kind of started a college conversation and
Yes.
all the stuff that kind of goes along with it, which, that's one of those conversations that it's long, it should be planned out well in advance. And there's so many variables to it. And it's some that unfortunately I think are really being addressed or talked about, or maybe even thought all the way through. It can be complicated. And so we wanted to
Yes.
kind of continue that conversation.
Well, it all started, we saw an article about how college kids were dropping out, or their biggest stress was money. And you would think that should have been addressed before they enrolled in a four-year college. So that's kind of how our conversation started. And as we looked further, I hate to say this, but it really comes back to financial literacy and the understanding of money. And if you haven't talked to your child about money and the consequence of not spending it correctly, or how you're spending it, it will continue to cause stress, especially through your college years. So that's the footprint that we're starting with, because it's devastating to see somebody who's 18 or 19 years old who thought her dreams were coming true and then realized she doesn't have money to eat,
Mhm.
pay her tuition.
Well, and that is actually something that is an issue. A lot of
Mhm.
studies were run and stuff like that, and some of them weren't giving some exact figures, or their figures were a little broad. Something like between 20 and 40% of students that were being talked about were having issues with things with housing and food and things like that. But I think the one that kind of got me was up to about 13% were actually homeless, and
Yes.
that's unbelievable. That trying to better yourself and get an education
Mhm.
to move forward in life, and you may not be able to eat or even afford a place to be able to live, and that just can't happen. There's an issue that needs to be resolved there. And again, like you were saying, Paula, I think it all comes down to financial literacy. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot that needs to be thought of ahead of time, because this can be avoided. This
Right.
doesn't have to be how it is. And so yeah, that's kind of what we wanted to talk about here
Yeah.
today.
So some of the articles start as early, saying, talk to your kids, your teachers about, and start at middle school and having the conversation. A lot of it is your preparedness, making sure your child is actually prepared to go to school, knows how to study and knows how to read, making sure that that's all there. But then also making sure you should have that conversation about money even in middle school. We go back to last week about the debit cards and how they're using it and how they're doing it, because you're going to be planning for a 4-year or 5-year expense, and sometimes kids don't understand the liability and what that costs and the stress that it puts on your parents, let alone the kids alone. But maybe not starting at a 4-year school, making sure your kids are
Absolutely.
you're at
Well,
home.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, keep your kids at home, keep them close, because those first 2 years, you haven't figured out what you're doing most of the time. And a lot of they're great colleges, almost everything transfers to 4 years now at this point, doesn't it? Out of a community
Well,
college or.
there's ways of finding that out before.
Mhm.
For instance, even back when I was in school, which was, a little while ago,
Mhm.
and but I know the community college actually near where I grew up actually had I don't know if it was agreement or a partnership or exactly how it was laid out, but you could actually attend there and you had guaranteed that your credits that you took at that school would transfer to SMU, Southern Methodist University, there in Dallas, Texas. And they had these partnerships with other universities. I think TCU was one there in Fort Worth. And I imagine there was probably a list that they had, but that was something that they had put forth ahead of time, that all you had to do was know, okay, well, any course I take here will transfer to these. Or you might, if they didn't have some kind of partnership, you'd have to go a little deeper and figure out, will this, basically all it is finding out if the course that is at this either junior college or community college or whatever type of school it is, has enough of the, the ingredients and the oomph that the course at the university has, and whether or not they'll accept it or not. And if you're having to do that for every single class, obviously that can be very daunting, but well worth it ahead of time to do that and know, than to take maybe 30, 45 hours or something, then transfer and realize you're going to get 6 hours transfer.
That would not be a good outcome. I think the other thing that comes along with that, and you and I both thought that there were better equipped counselors to talk to in high school. And we have two different articles that I'll include in our comments, of one that says, yes, they're out there. The other one says, not really. And some of the not really ones are not even educated or trained in college admission and what that looks like and how it works. So as parents, as grandparents, as godparents, as aunt, uncles, if you see that, pitch in. Kind of, sometimes it's just a matter of getting directed to go look on the internet or find out how to search it out to see what it's going to cost or what you're going to need, and make sure what your options are. Because, racking up those bills right from the get-go and then finding out you can't afford it, that's devastating for your child.
Absolutely. Well, there's because there are so many costs to college, and depending on how you do it, you can't eliminate some of those completely. I actually lived at home. I went to SMU, as I mentioned earlier, and I did go there all 4 years, but I had scholarships that helped pay for it. My mother had saved for me. She literally started the day I was born. So planned ahead.
Smart lady, yes.
I did what I could on grants and, things like that, scholarships. And so I had some of that, but I chose to live at home to keep that part of, the room and board and stuff like that down. And my mom was nice enough to feed me at home. And so, but that made a huge difference in what it would have cost me on the other side of that. And so there are a lot of things that can be done. It is a choice. And I was 18. I was ready to be, out on my own. I knew everything.
You thought you did.
All 18 years know everything, right?
Yes.
I was no different, trust me. And, but because I was talked to about money growing up, I did actually have a sense of what that cost was going to be, which is again why we were pushing for you to talk to your kids so much about money at these earlier ages, because they don't understand that value of money if they're not being talked to about it. So when they're taking out all these student loans, they don't understand. Yes, they're taking out 5,000 here, maybe 7,000 here, or 2,000 there. And so a lot of times they're not adding all of those up, because that can go over.
You have to add, you mean to add them up? You mean it doesn't go away as soon as you.
Oh, right. And so, but all those start adding up. And then, but when they kind of get to that end or something like that, and they're thinking, oh, okay, I have 60,000 in debt, or I have 50,000 in debt, or whatever. Sometimes that doesn't sound too bad when they're going, oh, but when I graduate, I'm going to get this $100,000 job, that pays me 100,000 annually, or 120,000 annually. Well, first, you got to get that job first. You may or may not get that job. You don't know. But second, those numbers don't actually work out as great as they may sound.
Well,
and
30% tax bracket right off the top, if you're going to be making $100,000, kind of chops you right down to what, 90,000 if you're doing 120. And then go ahead and try to feed a family if you're in a big city, and then you've got your mortgage or your apartment, And oh, by the way, you've got a student loan payment that's what, $500 to $1,000, depending on what you're doing and how you financed it. It makes a
Right.
huge difference.
Oh,
And
absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
it's plus you may actually have credit cards and stuff like that on top of that that you tended
right.
to rack up. Now, those are probably pretty small in comparison, but still, it all of that tends to add up. And sometimes, not having that life experience to be able to understand all of
Mhm,
that, it unfortunately you learn the hard way then, and
right.
you're constantly digging out of the hole
Mhm,
instead of being able to graduate and have the whole world in front of you. You're kind of starting in that hole and having to dig up, and you may be 30, 35, 40
yeah.
before you're getting level, and
Mhm,
where you're actually starting to climb, and you don't want to be there. that's
right.
that's not a great place to start at that point.
Yeah. So I've got a couple websites I'm going to put out. It's just information, but it's a matter for our people that listen to us to start talking about money. But and I think what's going to happen as parents when we start looking, you're going to see that you're going to be learning things that you haven't been doing in reference to teaching your children, or how you account for your dollars, or whether you have a budget to know how to live in, because here you're going to send your kids off to school and they don't know what a budget is. They just know, mom, I need money, or take my credit card and order lunch. They don't have those experiences if you don't help them from the time they're in middle school, even younger. But in middle school, when you already are beginning formative years, to be preparing for them to go off to school, and whether it be a 2 year or 4 year. The other thing is, pick the school. I mean, if you can stay in state, far cheaper, but look at the degrees you're choosing, the what you think is your future. Because if you're just spoke to somebody yesterday, he didn't realize he went to school to be a teacher, and he got out and he didn't realize the pay. He ultimately never stayed as a teacher because he couldn't afford to live on what he was making in order to pay his student loans.
Mhm.
So those are conversations you don't ever want to think about having, but I think it's important that you help them understand they need to look beyond their diploma in 4 or 5 years, because
Mhm.
it's apparently no longer 4 years to get out of college.
Well, and also we want you to be having these conversations with your kids, because as we kind of learned through some of this, is these conversations are not being had in schools maybe like you think they are. We definitely found some conflicting information on whether counselors and things like that are talking to kids,
Mhm,
and I think what we pretty much surmised from it is it may be very much from school district to school district how much is actually being discussed.
mhm,
And so just, in all honesty, make the assumption that not enough is being discussed, because
right.
unfortunately that's going to be true most of the time. And so, kind of like they say, if you want it done right, do it yourself. Kind of
Yeah.
take that attitude towards this,
Mhm,
because this is not something that you want to be tackling right there at the very end, senior year, trying to figure
mhm.
out how to make this happen, because you're behind the curve at that point. And so it's going to be a lot of catch up and a lot of missed opportunities, unfortunately.
Yes.
And so if you start, and I'll kind of just share the story that I had, and I don't know if this was something the school district that I went to did, or if maybe this was something my mother requested. But in middle school, they pulled, or I had a conference with my mother and a guidance counselor, and we made a 4-year plan for my high school, but with college as the end goal. So what I had to do to make sure that I met every requirement that I needed in order to go to what colleges that, at that time I was kind of thinking of. Obviously that can change over the 4 years, but there's a plan in place. And then we had multiple little, that first one was probably about an hour long, if I remember
Mhm,
correctly. The checkups through that was mostly just making sure I was still on track. Because mine actually had a couple little things, because I was an athlete. I lost some credit hours with my sport that I
mhm.
had to make up in summer school and in what we called 0 hour.
Right.
And so, but make sure I was on track for that. And so I had that throughout. Now, I don't, like I said, I don't know if that was my mother taking the initiative and calling the school and saying, hey, I want to sit down, or if
Mhm.
that was something my school district did. I'd like to think it was something they did, but I
I
don't
don't think
know.
so.
So, talk to your counselors at the school, give them a call, find out if they do that. I bet if you request it, they probably will. But, you know, at the very least, you want to be present in this conversation, because, you know, the conversation that may be had with just your kids may not be what you may think it actually is.
But they hear things differently. It might be the same words, they just hear it differently than how, as a parent, we would hear it. So, yeah,
I
that
can't
does happen.
imagine why. And remember, they spend your money a lot different than they spend their own.
Yes, yes, they do. Absolutely. So, hopefully this helps a little bit to, again, we are pushing financial literacy, having conversations about money, not being afraid to ask, looking for resources, and we're always here. But the sooner you sit down and have the conversation with yourself in the mirror, and then sooner you have the conversation with your children, it will take some of the stress away, because then they can understand when you say no, or when you say we need to think about it, or other opportunities or other situations that might resolve an issue. But if you don't have the conversation and they don't have the basics, you're going to be looking at a child that's stressed through college, that you would never want that to happen. And actually, just to follow up on that, the counselors are basically not, I think you had told me this, they're not working on college, they're working on social and emotional issues in their kids in school.
Yeah, many of them are not actually trained to have these types of they're
Correct.
trained to have a very basic conversation about maybe how to get ready for school, but not necessarily these advanced conversations that really should be happening. And
Yes.
again, not any fault of their own. That's not exactly what they were trained to do. And so, you know, you need to pick that up and run with it then. So, you know, you can actually take advantage of all these things.
Yeah. Well, I hope that helps you a little bit. I know school, you're probably planning for college, have already started, but maybe to help for your younger ones, but share the information. And if you have anything to share with us of schools that excel at this, or you have counselors that you want to give a shout out to that have done an incredible job making sure your life got easy and your child's travels to college have been a positive one, please share that with us. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, don't leave all these conversations, or it's not conversations, but all these decisions to the kids when they're not actually ready to make some of these on their own. You know, it's a give and take in this, and you need to help them with some of these, not push them, but help them understand some of the consequences that come along with a lot of these decisions, so that they don't get themselves over their head. So,
and stress you out.
Yes.
In the process.
Yeah. Stress you out, stress them out. You know,
Yeah.
we kind of started the conversation talking about how many drop out just because of the stress of money, you know, and you sure don't want to get in that position. So hopefully this was a little helpful for everyone, and reach out to us if you have information that you would like to share on this conversation, or any other conversation for that matter. And we would love to hear from you. So
absolutely.
we hope you
be safe.
Yes,
and
y'all
stay
be
dry.
careful up there in the Dallas area. I know it's going to be rough for y'all tonight.
Yep. Bye bye now.
Bye.